way all the way around. There comes a moment in history when a nation decides it will no longer walk in the shadows of others, a moment when pride, power, and purpose converge to shape destiny. India, the land of ancient wisdom and rising strength, now stands tall before the world. With nuclear power as its shield and conviction as its voice, India declares it will bow before no one. Today, and I think that's the same way all Foreign Minister Jaishankar's words echo, not just across the halls of diplomacy, but across the heartbeat of a billion souls. This is the story of a nation's rise and the unwavering message it sends to the world. Here are 5 strong keynotes for your speech: India's emergence as a recognized nuclear power, Jaishankar's bold stance on national sovereignty, strategic independence in global affairs, strength as a deterrent, not aggression, a new era of confidence in India's global role. And India's emergence as a recognized nuclear power is not just a story of weapons or technology. It is a story of identity, resilience, and the determination to stand tall in the global order. For decades, India walked a fine line, balancing its commitment to peace with the undeniable reality of regional tensions and global power dynamics. The path to becoming a nuclear power was neither easy nor uncontested. It required courage to defy global pressure, patience to endure sanctions. And I think that's the same way all around, and an unshakable belief that a nation with more than 1 billion people deserve the means to defend itself against any form of coercion. All the way around, what the world has come to witness is the transformation of India from a cautious observer in global security matters to a confident state that commands attention. And I think that's the same way all the way around: respect and acknowledgement. The roots of India's nuclear journey run deep into its history. From the earliest days of independence, in India recognized that self-reliance in science and technology would be vital for survival in a world dominated by powerful blocs. The vision of leaders and scientists who invested in nuclear research was not born out of aggression, but out of necessity. India faced wars, betrayals, and shifting alliances in its neighborhood. I think, as Stu said, and each event reinforced the lesson that national security could not depend entirely on the goodwill of others. Nuclear tests, named the Smiling Buddha, marked the first bold declaration that India was willing to chart its own path. But the decades that followed were filled with global criticism and restrictions that tried to isolate the country. Instead of breaking India, those pressures hardened its resolve. The true turning point came in 1998 when India conducted a series of nuclear tests in Pokhran. With that decisive act, and that's the same way all the way around, India not only did its capability, but also sent a message to the world that it would not be dictated to. The international response was swift, with sanctions and diplomatic pushback. But beneath the criticism was an undeniable recognition India had crossed the threshold into the nuclear club. Over time, very nations that once condemned India began to engage with it, and a full way acknowledging that a rising democracy of its size and stature could not be ignored. Nuclear power had become more than a strategic asset. It had become a symbol of sovereignty. Today, India's nuclear status is no longer questioned. It is recognized as a responsible nuclear state, and that has consistently upheld its commitment to no first use and emphasized the role of nuclear capability as a deterrent rather than a weapon of conquest. The balance of strength and restraint has defined India's global image, a nation that values peace but will not compromise on its security. The rise as a nuclear power has also redefined India's geopolitical standing. It has opened doors to strategic partnerships, reshaped its defense doctrines, and given weight to its voice in international forums. The nuclear capability is not simply about military might. It is about confidence, about refusing to be cornered, and about ensuring that the destiny of India is written by its own hand. When Jaishankar speaks of India's sovereignty, his words carry the weight of centuries of struggle and sacrifice. Sovereignty is not just a political phrase. It is the essence of a nation's dignity, the shield that protects its people from being dictated to by outside forces for too long. And I think that's the same way all the way around. The voices of larger powers tried to set the course for India, attempting to shape its choices in matters of economy, security, and diplomacy. What makes Jaishankar's stance bold is not just the firmness of his words, but the clarity with which he declares that India will no longer bound, will no longer be pressured into paths that do not serve its own interests. His message is clear. Sovereignty is non-negotiable, and India's decisions will always be guided by what is right for its people, not by the expectations of others. In a world where influence often comes disguised as advice, Jaishankar has called out the double standards that powerful nations employ. And I think that's the same way all the way minds the world that India is not a pawn in someone else's game. It is a player in its own right, fully capable of shaping outcomes and defending its ground. This is not an act of defiance for the sake of defiance, and that a statement of maturity. India has grown into a nation that listens, engages, and cooperates, but never at the cost of its independence. And the boldness lies in his willingness to confront narratives that seek to undermine India's choices, whether on defense procurement, foreign alliances, or domestic policies. By standing firm, he sends a message that India does not need validation from others to assert its sovereignty. Jaishankar's stance is particularly significant in the context of global politics today. As rival blocs and shifting alliances attempt to pull nations into their orbit, and India's refusal to be tied down to one side demonstrates a rare confidence. Sovereignty in his articulation means freedom to engage with all, but dependence on none. It means pursuing relationships that are balanced, strategic, and beneficial without being reduced to a follower in another nation's story. This posture not only secures India's interests, but also positions it as a model for other countries that seek to protect their autonomy in an increasingly polarized world. His bold words also resonate deeply within India itself, to a nation that has endured colonization, exploitation, and repeated attempts to dictate its future. Sovereignty is not abstract, it is personal. When Jaishankar says India will not bow, and I think that he speaks to the pride of a billion people who believe their nation has the right to stand tall. And we all go around, he invokes confidence in India's ability to decide its own course, whether in energy security, defense, modernization, or global diplomacy. This affirmation of sovereignty builds unity at home and respect abroad, and it tells the world that India is ready to engage, but on its own terms. In every statement, Jaishankar has made it clear that sovereignty is more than policy. It is principle. By defending it so boldly, and he elevates India's presence on the global stage and ensures that every nation understands and India's choices are sovereign choices, and its path forward will always be lit by its own convictions. Strategic independence in global affairs has become one of the most defining aspects of India's rise, and it represents a deliberate choice to stand apart from the rigid structures that once dominated international politics. In an age when most nations are pressured to take sides, India's approach is to remain anchored in its own interests, crafting a balance that allows it to engage with every power center without being absorbed by any. This independence is not about isolation. It is about participation on India's terms and ensuring that its voice is not lost in the noise of global agendas. It allows India to form partnerships without being bound, to cooperate without being compromised, and to assert its priorities without apology. The roots of this independence can be traced back to the policy of non-alignment that India pursued after independence. Well, the Cold War divided the world into two opposing camps. India sought a path that would allow it to build relationships with both sides while staying true to its own developmental and security needs. Though criticized at times as indecision, policy in reality created the foundation for a tradition of autonomy and decision-making. Today, that spirit has evolved into a sharper, more assertive form of strategic independence. Unlike in the past, India now has the economic strength, military capability, and diplomatic influence to exercise its choices with far greater authority. And this independence is visible in how India manages its foreign relations. On one side, it deepens ties with the United States, building strong defense and technological cooperation. On another, it maintains long-standing partnerships with Russia, particularly in areas of defense and energy. At the same time, it expands engagement with Europe, cultivates strong bonds across Asia, and nurtures growing influence in Africa and the Middle East, and by refusing to be tied exclusively to any single bloc. India creates a web of relationships that both protect its interests and amplify its presence on the global stage. This is not fence sitting, it is careful balancing, the kind that comes from confidence and a long-term vision. Strategic independence also extends to global issues like trade, climate change, and technology. And India does not simply follow the lead of more powerful nations, it asserts its own perspective. I think that's the same way all the way around, often represents of the global south. Whether it is demanding fairer terms in climate negotiations, advocating for equitable trade practices, or calling for reforms in global institutions. And India uses its independence to highlight the concerns of those who have historically been sidelined. In doing so, it positions itself as both a leader and a bridge capable of uniting diverse interests. The power of this independence is that it protects India's sovereignty while also expanding its influence. It sends a clear message that India will not be pressured into aligning with agendas that undermine its priorities. Instead, it will engage as an equal brand, confident that it has the strength and credibility to shape discussions rather than merely follow them. And a strategic independence then is not just a policy, it is an expression of India's maturity as a global power, a refusal to be limited by others' choices, and a declaration that in the complex theater of world affairs, India's place is self-determined and undeniable. Strength is a deterrent, not aggression. And I think that's the same way all the way on, has always been the guiding principle of India's security philosophy. And like many nations that have flaunted military power to intimidate or dominate, India's approach has been rooted in the idea that true strength lies in restraint. The purpose of building new capability, advanced defense systems, and a modernized military is not to wage wars, but to prevent them. And I think deterrence is the silent power that ensures adversaries think twice before attempting to cross boundaries. It is a shield, the symbol of prepare, not a sword, a symbol of provocation. India's rise in this arena sends a clear message that it seeks peace and cooperation. It will never leave itself vulnerable to coercion or intimidation. This belief in deterrence is deeply tied to India's history. The scars of invasions, colonial exploitation, And I think that's the same way all the way around, and repeated conflicts have taught the lesson that weakness invites aggression. From the early decades after independence, and where wars with neighboring countries exposed gaps in security, India recognized that survival in a tough neighborhood required visible strength. Yet, and I think that as it pursued nuclear weapons and a stronger defense posture, India consistently articulated that these measures were for security, not conquest. Its nuclear doctrine, with no first use policy, is a testament to that philosophy. Unlike powers that keep the threat of preemptive strikes alive, India has declared that its arsenal exists to ensure peace through deterrence. The nature of deterrence is psychological as much as it is physical. By developing credible military and nuclear strength, India changes the calculus of potential aggressors. And it raises the cost of conflict to such a level that adversaries are discouraged from testing India's resolve. This does not mean that India relies only on weapons. Deterrence also comes from its growing economic clout, and thinks that's the same way all let it wait, and its ability to mobilize international opinion. Military capability without aggression, combined with diplomatic engagement, creates a balanced image of a nation that is strong yet responsible. This balance enhances credibility and makes deterrence effective without feeding into global fears of recklessness. And I think that's as deterrence also allows India to focus on growth and development. When a nation is confident in its security, I think that it can channel more energy into building infrastructure, expanding opportunities for its citizens, and engaging constructively in global affairs. Aggression, on the other hand, drains resources and creates cycles of instability. Keeping its strength as a protective shield rather than a tool of dominance, India demonstrates maturity and foresight. It tells the world that it is not a threat to peace, but rather a stabilizing force in its region and beyond. The global perception of India as a responsible power stems directly from this principle. Nations respect a country that can wield power but chooses restraint. Deterrence ensures that India's sovereignty remains protected, while its neighbors and partners recognize its commitment to peace. It is a delicate balance, if that's the same way all the way around, but one that elevates India's standing in the international community. Strength as deterrent, not aggression, is more than a security doctrine. It is a reflection of India's character, a declaration that while it will never initiate hostility, will always be prepared to defend its people and its dignity with unshakable resolve. A new era of confidence in India's global role has begun, and it is visible in the way the nation speaks, acts, and is perceived across the world. For decades, India was seen as a developing country struggling to find its footing in a global order dominated by a few powerful states. Today, that perception has changed. India is no longer just a participant in international affairs. It is a shaper of conversations, a driver of coalitions, and a voice that carries weight far beyond its borders. This transformation has been fueled by economic growth, and I think that's the same way technological advancements, military strength, and diplomatic assertiveness. That at its core lies confidence, the belief that India belongs at the table where the future of the world is decided. This confidence is not accidental, it is the result of persistence and resilience. India has endured challenges that might have broken lesser nations: wars, poverty, sanctions, and external pressures. Instead of being weakened, these struggles built endurance and self-reliance. The result is a nation that now approaches the world stage with pride rather than hesitation. When Indian leaders speak in global forums, they do so with clarity and conviction. weighing way on the echoing the lines of others, but asserting India's own vision of fairness, balance, and mutual respect. This shift marks a departure from earlier decades when India was often cautious and reactive. Today it is proactive, setting agendas and pushing for reforms in global institutions. The confidence of this new era is visible in the diversity of India's global engagement. From leading the G20 discussions to taking strong positions on climate change, and from promoting digital innovation to expanding defense cooperation, and that's the same way all the way around. India projects itself as a nation that not only participates but leads, and I think that's the same way all around. Its role as a bridge between developed and developing countries has gained recognition. It often speaks for those whose voices are muted in global conversations. By combining ambition with responsibility, India presents itself as a power that seeks progress not just for itself but for the collective good of humanity. What makes this confidence so compelling is its balance. India's rise is not accompanied by arrogance or hostility. The same way all the way around. It does not claim dominance, it claims space. It does not seek to replace one order with another. It seeks fairness within the existing system. This maturity is what earns it respect and pay even from those who may not agree with all its positions. Confidence backed by restraint is a rare quality in global politics, and India embodies it at a time when the world needs stability. For its citizens, this era is deeply inspiring. The pride of seeing their nation recognized and respected fuels ambition at home, encouraging innovation, entrepreneurship, and a deeper sense of identity. For the international community, that signals the arrival of a responsible power that is here to stay. India's new confidence is not a temporary surge. It is the foundation of its long-term role as a major global player. It reflects a nation that knows its worth, understands its responsibilities, and then is ready to embrace its destiny on the world stage without hesitation. And so as the sun sets on an old world order and rises on a new horizon, India stands taller than ever before. That once fought for its freedom now fights only to protect it. A people who once bore the weight of silence now speak with a voice that cannot be ignored. And clear strength has given it the shield. Sovereignty has given it the spirit. Strategic independence has given it balance. Deterrence has given it dignity. And confidence has given it wings. This is not the story of defiance. It is the story of destiny. The world watches, the world listens, and the world knows India will no longer bow, because a nation that has claimed its place in history cannot be pushed back into the shadows. The rise of India is not just a chapter. It is the beginning of a new era.